Welcome. My name is Jonah. I'm a reference and programming assistant here at Regina Public Library. I want to welcome everybody to this evening's program. I'm very grateful to be able to help facilitate it, help host it anyways. To begin, I would like to just acknowledge that the land that we call home here in Regina is Treaty 4 territory. It is the traditional territory of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis. We recognize the diverse Indigenous peoples whose footsteps have marked the territory. We are in a Zoom interface tonight, so I have a chat window open on the right-hand side of my screen here. You can feel free to type comments or questions in there. I will be monitoring that chat window, but we won't actually be fielding any questions until a little bit later towards the end of the program, actually. I will ask that everybody keep your mics muted while we are in here, unless you are speaking, and that includes for the question time, then we'll be able to unmute and remute to our host content. That said, we are here this evening for an author reading with Regina Public Library's Writer in Residence. By connecting you with professionals in the community, we hope that you gain skills and knowledge that will help you to achieve your lifelong learning goals. Regina Public Library's writer in residence rather, is Jill Robinson, who is a Canadian writer, editor, and teacher with an MFA in creative writing. She is the author of the novel More in Anger, as well as four collections of short stories. She has contributed to multiple anthologies, magazines, and radio broadcasts. Jill has also served as the editor of Grain Literary Magazine, as well as Saskatoon Public Library's Writer in Residence, and has extensive experience as a writing mentor, workshop facilitator, and editor. She has been Regina Public Library's Writer in Residence since August of 2020. So Jill, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and please take it away.
Thank you, Jonah. Thanks very much for that very nice introduction. Welcome everybody to my big farewell event. I'm not gone for another month, a month today actually, but it made sense to have this program now. So here we are. The program will be divided into three segments. The first, I'm just getting a great big U, Jonah, on my screen. Is that good or?
I think that's just sort of the way the settings have turned up.
Oh.
So I can just turn off my camera for.
Oh, okay, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. It just sort of, it's okay. All right, so there are going to be three sections to the program tonight. The first one, I'll talk about my time here at the public library. Next, then we'll take a couple of minutes break, and then I'll talk to you about the research project that I've been doing while I've been here. And then we'll take a couple of minutes there, and then I will read to you from an essay that I finished while I was in Regina. So I'll begin. At the beginning of August 2020, I left my summer hangout on Galiano Island off the West Coast and headed home to Banff. I was there for a few days, and then on August the 14th, 2020, I left Banff and headed for Regina to take up my job as writer in residence at the public library. And I will be here, as I said, until the end of May. The job has been a gift from the gods and from the library. It's exactly what I needed. Within a year beforehand, I found myself single again, and then COVID hit, and I was wondering what I was supposed to do, what I was going to do about everything. And then I was interviewed for this job, and then that decision was made for me, and you are going to Saskatchewan. And so I came here. I have been hoping for the arrival of clarity while I was here, for greater insight and understanding of my purpose and the meaning of life, that kind of thing. Knowing it's a luxury even to be able to entertain the question. But how? The vastness of the prairie sky, the deceptively simple line between sky and land, the opening up width and breadth. I've lived in Saskatchewan before, and when I was 12, traveled the #1 highway across Canada to Expo 67. So the province isn't totally foreign to me. When I lived here before, though, I was living in Saskatoon. Regina is less familiar, though I've been here before a few times too. The first time in 1994, right after I moved from Calgary to be interviewed for the job of editor of Grain magazine, a job that I did get and held for 4 years. But what I remember most about that trip is the pouring rain I arrived in when I got here on the bus, and then walking under a flooded underpass, and the passing trucks whooshed tidal waves onto me, so that by the time I arrived at the Guild's office, I resembled the classic drowned rat. But I got the job. One thing that struck me early on is that there's no hierarchy in Saskatchewan writing. In Calgary, there were definite lines between what was worth writing about and what wasn't. It was so refreshing to be asked simply, "How's the writing going?" That you were writing was enough, working in words regardless of genre. I came down to Regina a few more times over the 16 years I was in Saskatoon to attend the Saskatchewan Book Awards as the rooting section or as the nominee, as well as for the Saskatchewan Writers Guild's mentorship windup. In those days, these celebrations were held at the Hotel Sask, and how elegant and grand we, my husband and I, felt arriving in the Queen City. It was like the fanciest excursion ever, from our modest house in City Park in Saskatoon to the opulent venues in the grand old Hotel Saskatchewan. It was like going, say, to Paris. I'm serious, it was fancy. Checking into an elegant room, getting gussied up, being fed and feted in a ballroom, and spending an irreverent and highfalutin evening with writers, almost all of whom made the most modest of salaries. What a treat. The ballroom for the ceremony, the lobby cocktail bar for drinks before and after, the lovely Victoria Park right across the street, the unfamiliar and therefore exotic shops between the hotel and the Cornwall Centre, which also seemed real city to me. And look, as you walk towards the Cornwall Centre, there's an honest to goodness Joe Fafard cow lying down behind that huge window. What an amazing place. Well, living here, some of the luster does wear off after a while. Some or all of the romance evaporates. But you know, the genuine place has become more important. Almost every day I walk my dog past the Hotel Sask. I walk through Victoria Park. I go to the Cornwall Centre to buy socks or a salad in the food court to take home for supper. Downtown Regina is becoming familiar, familiar. And Cathedral neighborhood too has become a little bit less groovy, a little bit less funky as reality sets in. But is it ordinary? No. Mundane? No. Is that what familiarity inevitably brings, or can it be fended off? Does it happen to people too? The poet Ezra Pound talked about putting old wine in a new bottle or new wine in an old bottle when it came to writing poetry. I wonder, how about when it comes to inhabiting a city? My apartment is in a refurbished heritage building, the Frontenac, a block and a half from the library. Eternal thanks to the poet Jerry Hill for giving me the heads up about availability and arranging so much for me. Renting via the internet worked out beautifully, and the day I arrived, there was Jerry waiting at the back door to give me a hand, lugging all my stuff up the 3 flights of stairs, no elevator, they ran out of money in 1929, to my apartment on the back corner of the sunny South Side. It reminded me of how helpful Saskatchewan people are. And I think about how many friends that I have here who lent me furniture, tables, chairs, you name it. It really, really made a huge difference. So when I got here, talk about sunny, it was sweltering. My poor dog Ringo lay on the floor panting. I soaked a towel in cold water and draped it over him, which he did not like. I lay naked on my back on my orange blow-up mattress, feeling my sweat trickle, waiting for cooler midnight air to offer brief respite before the next day's return to 37-degree weather again. I weighed the risks of COVID and hung out in Safeway because of the air conditioning. On my way home, I passed a couple talking about seeing ice sculptures at Lake Louise, and I tried to vicariously bask even momentarily in the memory of coal. Some images will define my time here. The V's of geese talking travel plans and then departing. The flags across the Albert Street Bridge. One day all Union Jacks, then all Saskatchewan, then a mix, 42 flagpoles, Treaty 4 flags, Métis flags. Who changes them, I wonder? Is it a bucket truck, or does someone raise and lower 42 flags individually? Another image, the Métis sashes tied on the trunks of the trees in Victoria Park in memory of Louis Riel. The temporary but permanent memorial on the shore of Wascana Lake to the mentally ill young man who killed himself there. The chunks of old buildings, pillars, and cornices, placed carefully as though they are Roman or Greek ruins, pieces of pedestals, of facades, of porticos, at strategic points in plazas and parks, incorporating them into the landscape that will someday, centuries from now, absorb them. I haven't seen Regina at its most vibrant, most alive, because it's been COVID during my whole stay. It seems almost like a ghost town or a planet in a science fiction story. It's sparsely populated, seems really quiet, except there is a surprising number of sirens breaking the stillness and quiet, fire engines, ambulances, police. At first I went, oh no, and then somebody told me, when you hear sirens, think, oh good, help is on the way for somebody. I thought, there, now that's the right, that's the right attitude rather than, oh no, what's happened now? There's a woman who lives at the end of my hall who goes out in her high heel sandals every night to put out a small mound of carrots for the jackrabbits out there. And there are so many jackrabbits in Regina, it's amazing. I've met other women in the building too, and we text and we go for walks a distance and we share distancing cups of tea, and I'm so grateful for their friendship. Here's a journal entry. It is so hot. 34 yesterday and today, and tomorrow will be 36 or 37. Last night around 8:30, some clouds with potential to be thunderclouds arrived, but they didn't come across. I was going to buy myself some flowers, but they died of the heat before I got back. Last night, I walked down to Wascana Park and sat at a picnic table in the shade and wrote longhand in a notebook while Ringo flaked out on the grass and watched the rabbits and squirrels. My friend in Calgary tells me that according to the poet Jane Kenyon, when you move, it takes some time for your soul to catch up to you. That's actually helpful to know. I'm feeling so much at sea, at field, at dirt parking lot. My soul compelled to journey with me from temperate, secluded West Coast island life on Galiano, ensconced in a cabin in the woods, in the forest of cedar and fir near the sea, in the ferns and stinging nettles, to an apartment with views of gravel parking lots in the middle of a blazing hot city under a clear and glaring, unrelenting sky. That will take some getting used to, I think, and not just for my soul. The parking lots behind and beside my building are, as I say, empty, and looking out, I see a wasteland with metal fencing and designated plug-ins. A garbage truck goes down the alley just after 6 a.m. and empties the dumpsters. Yesterday, a distressed woman over by the dumpster at the Y was yelling at someone I couldn't see who maybe wasn't there, yelling, ah, ah. Her anger and pain palpable. Give me back my money. Give me back my effing money. Helplessness, desperation. What can be done without money? Really, how can anyone get by with no money? If someone takes all the money you have and you don't have even a single smoke, I think, have I ever been where she is? Ever? Not so as anyone could tell, I think. Not so as I yelled out to the universe from my guts, but I've been close, tight and hard and desperate inside myself. The garbage bins were emptied yesterday, so there's not much in them, and a couple climbs right in. I lie on my back on the floor, panting alongside Ringo while I listen to them rummage and converse. Two other people who rummage through the dumpster during the day are women from another country, and they smile and say, hello, Rinko, and they're so friendly, and I'm interested in these women, but I don't know what to do beyond offering a few pop cans and smiling and saying hi. The tall, lean, black man with one leg is named Andy. He's from Eritrea. I spoke to him one day and I asked about his leg, and he told me that he lost it in the Civil War and was rescued by the Russians and ended up here where he has been for many years. I think about the people in the dumpster. I cannot imagine being so without that I hope to find something, anything that might make my life a tiny bit better in there. Hunting through other people's garbage of every description, looking for something. I have never been in that situation. I can't imagine being so utterly bereft of what I need to survive. I'm a white educated woman with a good job, albeit temporarily. My difficulties pale in comparison. I know this definitively without having a clue what their difficulties are. I'm glad I can see a little green, not just the parking lot when I look out this window, a couple of deciduous trees. Walking back from Wascana Lake, I was thinking about all the brick houses and buildings and how every single one of those bricks and every single one of those structures was placed there by hand, someone's hands, hundreds upon hundreds of bricklayers in the world, thousands. And it isn't easy. You don't just slap on the mortar and stick on the brick. There's the plumb line, for example. Do I sound like I know what I'm talking about? Haha, the fiction writer's job. What do I know? Not much, but I've been reading up. You need a masonry trowel for leveling, spreading, shaping, buttering a brick, a bucket trowel for slapping, slathering on the mortar, for getting the mortar from the sides of the bucket. 6 months later, it's so freaking cold, 37 below instead of above, and I can't see out the window for the ice and frost. Flowers would cheer up my apartment, but they'd freeze before I got them home. I have to drag my reluctant part husky, supposed to be fine in winter dog, out the door for a pee. And as I yank down my toque and pull up my mask, I remember that when I left Saskatchewan 10 years ago, I thought I'd never experience another Saskatchewan winter. But you know, I'm glad I have. I know what there is to like about winter. The hoarfrost, the icy ruts in the road, the breathtaking cold, the blizzards. I'm glad I've been made to remember not to venture outside without every part of me swaddled and swathed. Well, I talk to my friends in Victoria who report on the green shoots and the snowdrops and crocuses, the tiny persistent signs of the advent of spring. It's about contrast, right? Andy from Eritrea goes home for 2 months, but then the 2 months is up and we wonder if he's got stuck over there and if that's a good or a bad thing for him. If he's with family or with people who know and love him, and if it's a gift, a blessing in disguise, etc., thanks to COVID, restricts his return to the still cold of February in Regina. When I first met Nancy, Tanya, and Courtney from the library on August 21st, we sat on folding chairs in Victoria Park across from the downtown branch. After that initial meeting, there was an interview with the newspaper and introductions to many of the staff in the downtown branch, and eventually branch managers and the people who work in the bowels of the building helped me with that darn basement printer and how to find supplies and etc. And then I started meeting writers and running programs, and the past 8 months have been richly rewarding in so many ways. Thank you to all the people who helped me by running the programs, with finding stuff, with telling me who to ask for what. And thank you to the Dunlop Gallery for lending me artwork for my office. I've met people by Zoom, on the telephone, in person wearing masks in a boardroom, with coffee in the foyer of office towers, via email, and I've read the most extraordinary and varied writing in terms of subject matter, approach, and style. And the writers themselves are just as individual. All of you are. That's part of what makes a writer a distinctive voice, plus determination and plain old hard work. What's that phrase? 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. Speaking of perspiration, it's warmed up out there a lot. The geese are back, discussing mating and nesting loudly as they fly by my window in the morning. Geese fill the air on my walks. I talk to them. Welcome back. I hope you find a good nesting site. Is that your mate? I hope you find enough to eat. Gulls cry, rabbits transition from white to brown. The ground transitions from white ice and snow to white bits of garbage and other detritus against dead grass and dirt. The ground is ugly, so you look up at the sky and the promise of impending green. And I noticed it today walking around the lake, the green is on the way. And so is my impending departure. I'll return to Banff first, and then as I do each summer, I'll head to Galiano Island. So please think of me. I'll be thinking of you. Thank you for this opportunity, Regina Public Library. It's been a pleasure. And it's been a pleasure meeting you writers too, reading your work and getting to know you a bit. This has been an important and valuable time. And now I just want to quickly show you some pictures. If I can figure out how to do this. Oh, I can. Okay, look, this is at the border, crossing the border into Saskatchewan. These are bales of hay. There's my dog, Ringo, saying, why is it so damn hot? There's the Frontenac where I live. There's the dumpster I watch. There's the memorial to the young man who killed himself there. I just think this is so cool how they don't just sort of cart away all the old relics of the buildings, but they reuse them. And there's some inside the buildings too, inside the Cornwall Center and inside the library itself, but also here and there throughout the parks and that. I think it's just, whoever came up with that idea, it's just brilliant. And they're the Métis sashes. You can't see them, it's not a great picture, but well, you can kind of see them. And this is a sculpture. All of this is in front of City Hall. And these sculptures, they're all just the front of the people. So the backs are empty, like that they're just the, what do you call it? It's not crust, it's, I'm sure there's a word for it. Anyway, they're hollow at the back. There's just the front part of them. So I think that's pretty neat. Okay, so I'm gonna stop that for now. Wow, got through part one, okay. All right. I guess I'll just carry on, shall I? May as well. I guess I should do this by starting out. Well, I got to start sharing the screen again, sorry, and show you. Oh, where did it go? Come on. There we go. This is part of my family. This is the WiR family, W-E-I-R, and they live in Winnipeg, or they lived in Winnipeg. And the woman in the center with the long string of pearls is my grandmother, Alma. And beside her is her sister, Laura, and behind her is her sister, Dorothy. And I'll say something about Dorothy later on. They had two hardware stores in Winnipeg that they ran, and the fellow on the far right is the guy that I'm going to be talking about. That's Fred. He is the first son. So the oldest is Alma, then comes Laura, and then comes Fred. And then beside him is Jack, and Jack ended up working in the hardware store. And so did the fellow on the far right, who was, every family's got somebody who's not quite right in the head. And that was the guy, that was Stanley on the far left. And then Morley at the back. Morley went down to Texas and bought a small hotel down there. And a fellow didn't pay his bill, and Morley confronted him, and the guy shot him dead. So that's what happened to him. So anyway, so I've got this kind of interesting stories about every member of the family. So my idea is that someday, eventually, I'll get around to writing something that involves them all. But the reason that I was focusing on Fred here is that Fred decided he wanted to go into the hardware store, but his father said no, they needed a professional man in the family. So, so he came to Regina to go to law school in 1923, and then stayed there until he died in 1947. So that Reginald. Oh, I call him Reg. I call him Reg. Here I go. I've changed the name. But his name is actually Fred, so I'll try to stick to his real name. Oops, what am I doing with her? Anyway, that's when they got married, him and Alice, but I'm not quite ready for them yet. Just a second. Yeah. So Fred would have worked in the family hardware store, but oh no, said his father, they needed a professional man in the family. And so he went into law at the University of Regina. When he finished, he indicated to his father that he wouldn't be returning to Winnipeg. He stayed in Saskatchewan and articled in a practice above the Novia Cafe. And that's where, I decided, he met Alice, a Fort Capel school teacher, she really was, when she was in town with her mother, and they stopped for lunch at the Novia Cafe, and he was there too. I made that up. He joined the law practice after he was called to the bar, and then he and Alice were married in January of 1931. They bought a house on Angus Street. They lost their first baby in 1932. Their daughter Audrey, Audre, who was adored by her father, was born in 1933, and then her brother Vickers was born in 1935. So that's the information I had to go on. And one of my sources when I started doing research was, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar, if you're into family research at all, about the Henderson directories, that the Henderson directories are in the library, and up until there got to be a lot of privacy concerns, you could go and consult them, and you could look up people by address or name, and often all you have is an address. They tell you that Mr. So-and-so lived here, and he was a train conductor. Or vice versa, you can do it in the reverse too. So I went to the Henderson directories to look up Fred WiR to find out what I could find out about him. So I found the first reference in 1923, and then I found a bunch of the different houses that he lived in, and then, I just got lost for a second, sorry. Yeah, okay. In 1926, he's listed as living in the YMCA. He lived on the King's Hotel on Scarth Street, the Champlain Hotel on 11th and Rose. So see that I did get to find out these sorts of things. Newly married in 1931, they lived at 1122 College, next at 105 Angus Crescent. Then they bought a really nice house at 3010 College. And that was the same year that he became a senior partner at WiR Hamilton and Knowles in the Gordon Block, which is the building that the Novia Cafe is in. So, and then he died. He died on February the 13th, 1946. And he dropped dead of a heart attack. So I imagine that they just bought this really nice house because things were on the up and up. He's just become a full partner, and they got the nice house, and then he died. So this is what I wrote about that. And okay. After lunch on a summer Saturday in 1945, Risa, 13, well, I'll call her Audrey because that's her real name. Audrey, 13, approached her father lying on his back on the Chesterfield with the newspaper. Audrey flopped on the carpet beside him, reached up and walked her fingers up the side and over his stomach. Daddy, she said, stopping at his navel and pushing gently into the fabric over his flesh with her fingertips. Let's go to the races. Please don't do that, he said. Not today. My stomach's upset. Don't tell your mother. She'll think it's the lunch. Please, Daddy, I won't tell her if we can go. Audrey, don't. You could take it easy once we get there, couldn't you, Daddy? She filled her eyes with tears. Please, she said. And guess what? Starshine is running today. After 10 minutes more of that, he took his hat from the rack. See you later, mater, he called to his wife. Alice came to the kitchen doorway. You don't look well, Alice said. Are you all right? Fred paused, his hat in midair. Mom, said Audrey. I'll be fine once we get there, Fred said, setting his hat on his head. But he didn't feel better, was gray and distracted when he placed his bets and barely watched the races. Audrey feigned the excitement for them both and gave him pouty looks. They collected their modest winnings and strolled arm in arm back to the car holding hands, but he was not well and he wondered if he'd be able to drive. At home, he opened the front door. Little Fred, 10, was standing at the bottom of the stairs holding the post waiting for them. How long had he been there? We're home, tra-la, said Audrey gaily, pushing past him. Little Fred, you missed a good time. Hi, Daddy, he said. Son, Fred nodded at him in greeting and dropped dead in the foyer. So, all right, so that's what I had. But then, fact and fiction, eh? Fact and fiction, you find out the truth about things. And I find the collision of fact and fiction really interesting and requiring necessary revisions. For one time, I was doing research in Saskatoon about my father's side of the family, who were also spent quite a lot of time in Saskatchewan, and I was researching the different churches and where they had gone to church and where they'd met, my grandmother and my grandfather. And I found the church and I was like, oh, and I'm standing right here where they stood, and they went in this door and out this door, and there's the choir loft where she was singing and he was enthralled. And well, it turned out it wasn't that church at all. so there I'm going, oh gee, so much for that little trip. So that's the kind of thing that happens to me anyway. And then another thing that happened was I had it being in the summer with the horse races. Only I tried to research this and couldn't find anything about horse races. And then anyway, so then I was on the Facebook page and I started consulting with people. There's this amazing historical Regina Facebook page, and there's another one called Moose Jaw Days with a Z on the end. So I asked them if anybody knew of these people or did they know anything about them. And well, turns out that some people did. Some people had gone to school with them, like grade 4 or 5 or something. And but also that what they were involved in, deeply involved, Alice and Audrey, was equestrian work. And so the fact that he died in February and the fact that it was equestrian, then I knew that it must have been not the horse races that Dorothy got involved with in Winnipeg and lost her diamond ring at the horse races on a gambling debt, but rather equestrian work. And so I found out something about them I didn't know. Then I found out that Audrey and her brother, little Fred, had graduated from Moose Jaw High School. And I'm going, Moose Jaw? But they lived in Regina, so what were they doing in Moose Jaw? Well, then I gradually found out that after Fred died, they must have had to sell that house because they probably had just bought it on, hopes and dreams and had to let it go. And so she ended up taking a teaching job again and got a teaching job in Moose Jaw. So that's how they ended up in Moose Jaw. So, and then after a while, then the kids graduated from school and she ended up back in Fort Capel where she built, I think that they were not very wise with money. It's a trait in my family. Anyway, so she built these 2 houses side by side, identical houses in Fort Capel that I really want to try to find someday, where she built one house for her mom and one house for her. And then that's how they were going to live happily ever after, except that they couldn't afford to finish the houses, so the houses had to be sold. And then her mother died, and then she remarried and moved to Victoria. So anyway. And Dorothy, I found Dorothy, the woman standing behind my grandmother, I discovered had come to Regina. I didn't know that she'd been in Regina. I knew that she'd gone somewhere and worked in a bank, but then I found her in the Henderson directories in 1925. So that's when she was here, and she did work in a bank. And then that combined nicely with the story that I already knew, that she had an affair with some guy named WiR, WHERRIT in the bank, and that didn't work out, and she went back to Winnipeg. So it was Regina. So I'm fascinated by this kind of research and where it can take you and how you have to correct yourself. And then you have to do your best to sort of make up what might have happened in between. And then maybe something else will come along and throw that out the window too. But anyway, so that's what I've been doing with Fred WiR. And I just wanted to show you, if I can, with my very poor technical skills. That's a terrible picture of Fred and Alice. This is one of the hotels. Is that the, now see, I didn't write down the names of the hotels. So somebody out there, one of you guys knows what hotel this is, but these are the places where he lived. Anyway, this series of, there's the Hotel Champlain. Neat that all the old cars out front. And this was what? I don't know, another place, maybe, oh no, that was the Y. That was the Y. This was one of the first houses that they lived in. Another house that they lived in. And so you can walk by, see, and now I can actually do it. Stand there and go, he walked in and out that door. She walked in and out the door. This is the house. This is the nice house at 3010 College where he died. So right in there through that door, he dropped dead, and then their lives changed. And this is, geez, this is the weirdest sculpture thing in front of the Novia Cafe at the Gordon Block there. I just think that's so strange. Anyway, the Novia Cafe was over on the right-hand side, and the law offices were above. Yeah, and see, there's the Novia Cafe right there. That's when it was up and running. So this historical Regina Facebook page, it's just amazing the discussions that go on there about when the tornado came through and when the fire happened, and people go, oh yeah, I remember my grandfather did blah blah blah, or my mom worked in that cafe, or it's just remarkable. I just love going on there. Oh, and this 1912. This is, I think, the doorway that they would have gone into to enter the building. There's their gravestones. There's Fred and his daughter Audrey. It was very sad. Audrey, she died very young. She was what was it, 27 when she died. She always held herself responsible for her father's death, for making him go out when he didn't want to go out. And so she felt that it was her fault. Anyway, so, and here's another example of not knowing what really happened and then having to try to decide what you should morally or actually say or not say about it. And she started working in a law office, and she had an affair with one of the lawyers in the law office who was married, and she got pregnant. And he said, well, we won't need your services anymore. And away she went, and she died. Either my mom said she died of a self-inflicted abortion, and my aunt, my mother's sister, said, no, she hanged herself. So, well, I don't know, I guess you just take whatever works within the fabric of the story that you're writing. I mean, this is a long time ago. These stories are very old, and I don't think that it would offend anybody anymore. But of course, you do have to think about stuff like that. But yeah, so she died, and the little boy Fred went off to be make it big in the oil patch, and he went and lived in Venezuela or something for a lot of years. Anyway, so that, I guess I've told you, I guess I've told you more than you ever wanted to know about Fred WiR. Yeah. Oh, yeah, and I just was, I guess I was going to show you, like these are, Audrey left home to make their home at Fort Capel. Mrs. WiR was a resident for 20 years. So these are the kinds of newspaper clippings that I don't know who this person is on the Facebook pages who digs around and finds these little teeny clippings about individual people. Just going, wow. And then here, out of town riders in Regina for the Light Horse Show. And there's Audrey WiR down there from Fort Capel. Oh, that's me on Galliano. All right, we've arrived at part 3. Well, I was going to give you a little break in between, but maybe we're not going to have time for a little break. This story that I'm going to read to you is from an essay. It's an excerpt from an essay that I submitted to the SWG's COVID anthology. And this is the part of it that's going to appear in that anthology. So maybe I'll just leave that picture up there because the story is set right there at my cabin. And that's Ringo, my dog. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Maybe I'll just have a quick drink. This is my Dr. Fauci mug. Wash your hands, it says. You know, when you get a job and make some good money for a while, you want to go buy stuff. So I bought a Dr. Fauci mug. All right. This excerpt is called Losing Ellis. Names have been changed. I just arrived on Galiano Island after visiting my son in Victoria, and I intended to spend 3 or 4 nights at the cabin before heading home to Banff. First thing, even before I unpacked the car, I hiked up the hill to turn on the solar panel on the water. I was expecting the cistern to be full from last autumn, but it wasn't. It was empty, except for maybe 3 inches of water. What gives, I thought. I looked more closely and saw that the black PVC pipe that carries the water from the well to the cistern was broken, and that's how all the water had drained out. Shoot, no water, which was a big disappointment because we'd sunk a big whack of dough into finishing the cabin so that one of us could come out here for a month or even 2 through the winter. Last summer was the first time everything was up and running tickety-boo, and I must say it had been glorious. Electricity, hot and cold running water, imagine. But now it was March and the time of the rapid implementation of COVID-19 regulations, and suddenly travel was discouraged. I was fearful about being out in the open with my Alberta plates, even if I drove right through, so I decided I'd stay on Galiano as long as necessary. Why not? There were worse places to be than on a small island surrounded by sea, in a cabin in the forest, up a grassy driveway 300 meters from the nearest neighbor. I didn't have to see anyone, didn't have to touch anything anyone might have touched, didn't have to breathe the same air as anyone except my dog Ringo. Now, feeling intrepid, I put on disposable surgical gloves and filled water jugs at the neighbors, and I emailed our friend Ellis about helping me with the cistern. Sure, he responded promptly. Sure, he'd help me. Good old Ellis. The cistern wasn't exactly his area of expertise. He was first and foremost a surveyor. But his range of interest was wide, and he enjoyed solving problems, and he was one of those people who are just good at fixing things. Whenever I was at the cabin on my own, I regularly plied him with ice cream and crib games so he'd never abandon me. Ellis came over and we drank tea together at the picnic table near the cabin. He sat down at one end of the table on one side and folded his long legs under it, and I sat at the other. As I'd asked, he brought cookies, but instead of my favorites, those round chocolate-covered marshmallow and biscuit ones with the layer of strawberry jam in them, or even chocolate chip or shortbread, he brought Mr. Christie's social tea biscuits. Thanks, I said, frowning as I took the package of ultra-plain rectangular cookies. I think. Ellis laughed as he held out the cup he'd brought, and I poured the tea. Good to see you, I said. You too, he said. But I think you're looking a bit too thin. Not enough ice cream, he said. How have you been? Ringo was busy sniffing around Ellis's van, looking for Baron, Ellis's dog, and whining with incredulous disbelief. Where was he? For the first time ever, Ellis had left his dog at home, and Ringo was miffed. He looked balefully at me. I told him that Baron was coming. I myself didn't miss Baron, though I'd never have said that. Baron is an unkempt, smelly, hairy, ill-mannered, ocean stink, unbathed Airedale who heedlessly runs into me, jumps up and tries to slobber, pant, and clamber through the van window, and I just don't like him. However, That's not how Ellis felt, or Ringo. How are things with Lorne? Ellis asked about my husband. Or should I ask? He gave a half laugh. Okay, I said. He's moved back to Saskatoon. Weren't you done with Saskatoon? That's where the new woman is. New woman, eh? Yes, sir. He shook his head. I can't get my head around that. Me neither, ha ha. I mean, I can't imagine a man leaving a woman like you. Oh, Alice, I said. A sunbeam of gratitude lit up and warmed me from inside and lifted my heart. Just what I needed to hear. You are the best. And I reached over to lay my hand on his, but remembered COVID and pulled back. Neither of us had got the hang of all things COVID yet, like everyone on the planet, just flung into quarantine. And though Ellis and I made an attempt, we still screwed up. We were good about the cups and the cookies. I slid them out of the package onto a plate, and we were careful to take the ones that we touched. But when I wanted to show him a picture of the cistern problem, I handed my phone to him as a person normally would do, and he took it from me as a person normally would do, and looked at the picture and handed the phone back to me. And in that moment, our eyes met in sudden and mutual recognition of what we'd just done. I felt panic rising. I ran inside for the hand sanitizer. I'd made it just that morning from aloe vera and rubbing alcohol. If it rains, it pours. That night, Ringo, after chasing a deer, returned panting heavily with delight from exertion and a nasty cut on his foreleg. Shoot. I had to take him over to the vet on Main Island the next day, and we missed the ferry back. But thankfully, my camping gear was still in the trunk, so it was no big deal for us to stay overnight and come back to Galliano the following day. I called Ellis from the ferry lineup. He'd fixed the cistern, he said. His helper, Bobby, had been along as well. Thanks so much, I said. You're wonderful. Well, I don't know about that, he said. He sounded a bit low-key. What's wrong? Oh, I went to bed early last night, and I've been there all day. My tummy's upset. I smiled to myself, the way he referred to it as his tummy. It was something I ate, he said. Golden beets gratin. They were so good, I ate too many. Yikes, I said. And then the ferry started to load and I had to say goodbye. Get better, I said. Talk soon. But I thought about COVID and hoped he didn't have it and felt a rush of fear that if he had COVID, then I might too, because we both touched my phone like that. Please, I said to my stricken face in the rearview mirror, please don't let me have COVID, please. Back at the cabin, I gave Ringo a painkiller, checked the bandage on his wound, invited him up on the bed, and we napped long and deep together, spooning. The next day, the sun broke through for a couple of hours, and around 3, I climbed the hill to the cistern and had a look. I stopped to catch my breath halfway up and imagined how hard it must have been for Ellis with his bad knee and heart condition. That man was not in good shape, and this hill could do anyone in. It was so nice of him to help me. He always did. The pipe was hooked back up again and sealed tight. I stood on the wooden platform and unscrewed the black stopper and peered into the cistern. Maybe 7 inches of water. Yes, things were getting better. I dumped in a bit of bleach to take care of the grunge and went back down to the cabin. Soon I could fill the hot water tank and turn it on, and at least part of life would be good again. It was going to be strange getting used to my husband's not puttering around, absorbed in his projects and activities. We'd established a rhythm over the years. I'd liked how we worked around each other, each in our own orbit, and overlapped at meals, the beach, the crib board, or with the friends we'd made on the island, including Ellis. I liked watching Lorne from my writing porch as he got his power tools out of the shipping container and set to work building or fixing. Or when he loaded his kayak on the roof of his car, gathered his life jackets, paddles, waterproof pouch, and headed for the boat launch at Montague Harbor. More stuff if it was an overnight trip. And then his arrival back home again and my asking if he needed a hand unloading the kayak and the rest of the gear. We were together and apart in a way that worked. Just for me, it turned out. There'd be no more of that. I couldn't reach Ellis by email or by phone. I should have gone over to check on him, but I was worried about COVID. When he finally answered the phone, he sounded even lower. And he said he felt he'd had some kind of a blockage. He'd had a horrendous stomachache like he'd never had in his life before. And then he said, all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, whoosh, came torrents of diarrhea so bad he couldn't get to the bathroom. At this point, I didn't want to hear a freaking word, held the phone away from my ear and went, ay, 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 though I heard it anyway. Finally, there was a pause. Barely able to speak, I said, I have to go. And he said, I'm going back to sleep. Sweet dreams, I said. Call 911 if you get any worse. I'm serious. Over the next couple of days, I settled into my new old familiar life on the property. I dragged the fireplace grate out from under the cabin and filled it with the flat of flame-colored marigolds I brought over. I filled and hung the bird feeders. I started clipping the overgrown salal on my trails, watering and weeding my pathetic raised bed of rosemary, mint, and oregano. I fertilized the 2 remaining rose bushes in the stone corner bed Lauren had made for them. Around supper time on Wednesday, Ellis's neighbor called to tell me that on Tuesday, the paramedics had entered Ellis's house in COVID gear and rushed him to the boat dock in an ambulance. From there, he had traveled by float plane to the closest major hospital, where in the midst of testing, he had collapsed and died. I didn't know what to do when I got the call. Thank you, I said, and the call ended. And then I was frozen, standing there in the cabin with Ringo looking at me, wondering. Oh no, I whispered, Ellis is dead. Ringo's tail wagged slightly. What was I saying? Oh no, the world was different, shifted in that second. Dead. The circles each of us has around us. Ellis, I thought, oh, Ellis. And then I thought again of myself and grew afraid. Please, I said again, please don't let him have had COVID. I called Lauren. I know, but I did. He's the only person in the world who knows Ellis without my having to explain everything. This, I thought as I called, is an example of what will happen more often, the cumbersome task of having to establish context and history and precedent before explaining anything to someone new. Whereas after so many years with the 2 of us entwining history, the other of us just understood what we meant by many things, people, situations. Call me, I managed to croak to his voicemail. And lo and behold, he did. I could barely talk. Have you ever been so stressed your throat constricts and you make a heaving sound like a backwards groan while you're trying to suck enough air inward while also trying to breathe and trying to speak? That's what happened. But it got easier, and I told him what I knew, except that I was afraid of having COVID. And I thought after the call ended that he hadn't offered me any comfort. Had I expected some? How are you doing? Are you okay? Foolish woman, get a grip and lower your expectations. He's not the man you thought he was. Goodness was what he said over and over when I told him about Ellis. Goodness, goodness. The next day, Ringo and I walked down to Ellis's house, which looked just the same, but of course wasn't because he wasn't inside anymore. Through that very door, I thought they took him, the door now closed so innocently with its curtain drawn. I stuck a note with my name and phone number in the frame for whoever comes to take care of things. I offered my help. I didn't try the door, and the windows were too dirty to see through, and anyway, the sun was wrong. Turning away, I thought how somebody was going to have one hell of a job cleaning out his house. He had so much stuff, and the whole place had perpetually needed a major clean. The smell would be just horrible in there, dirty dog and diarrhea. Oh, I wondered again about COVID. How many days before it was safe to go inside? And then I wondered about Baron. Where was the dog? Not there. Back at the cabin, I climbed the hill up to the wellhead. The cistern is full to the brim with clean, cold water from 600 feet down. I open the valves and the water gushes down the hill through the pipe and into the underworld of the cabin. I go down and crawl on my belly on plywood scraps and open the valves, and I hear the water gush inside to the toilet, the hot water tank, the shower, the sink. And then from inside the cabin, I hear the ping of my email and I go inside. Ellis's neighbor says Ellis did not die of COVID. He had a heart attack. Relief floods through me. I haven't realized how tense I've been. I turn on the tap, fill a tall glass of cold water, quench my deep thirst. That's it. So, and look at that, 4 minutes. Isn't this wonderful? My timing is better than I thought it would be. So I guess I can ask you, or Jonah can ask you if anybody has any questions. We have like 3 minutes, or I can just tell you thank you again.
Yeah, there's as mentioned, about 3 minutes for questions. If anybody does have any burning questions to ask, give a short amount of time for that. And if not, of course, any final words, Jill?
I would like to say hi to my friend Tracy Melnick down in Grand Coteau, Louisiana, and to my friends Scott Herzer in Honolulu. And I don't know if my friend Robin Lewis from another part of Hawaii is there. These are people I went to university with in Alaska a million years ago. Anyway, but thank you all for coming. I'm really delighted to see you and to have you see some of what I've been doing while I've been here. So I guess that's it for me.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Jill. We did just get one very last minute question saying essentially those stories are great. Will they become published?
Well, here's hoping. That's the idea.
I'll be watching for those publication. Those are really great. Do you have others that are published that are along that line?
Well, the project I've been working on for the last actually year and a half, 2 years, has been this collection of creative nonfiction essays, which with the working title "And Then He Was Gone," oddly enough, and there are 13 essays, and a couple of them have been published before in various literary journals, but as a whole, I'm hoping that I'll finish. My goal is to finish the collection before I leave here, so I've got another month, and then I'll look into getting the collection published. So we'll see then.
Okay.
Thank you for your interest.
Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, like I'm planning on writing family stories.
Yeah.
And such great examples, the ones that you just, all three of them.
Well, thank you. And why don't you email me at WiR@reginalibrary.ca and we can set up a time to just chat. I'd like to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
WiR, is that somewhere? Am I going to know that from some other?
I can write it in the chat here.
Oh, I'm trying to find a piece of paper. I got 10,000 in front of me, but not one I want to write on. WiR, oh, writer in residence.
Yeah, that'd be it.
WiR at Regina.
ReginaLibrary.ca.
Exactly. Okay.
All right. All right.
Well.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for coming. I've had a lovely time and I hope you've enjoyed yourself too.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much again, Jill.